Hey guys, we're going to get started on Chapter 7, and as you can see that Chapter 7 deals with hospital autopsies and autopsy rates, which makes a lot of sense for us to move into that chapter after we've just finished the death rate chapter. And in some of your worksheets and other things like that, you saw references towards autopsies, and now we're going to figure out how to calculate those formulas. So you've got a lot of key terms here and your objectives for the chapter, but we're going to launch right into it at the bottom of page 121. An autopsy is an examination of a dead body to determine the cause of death. They can confirm or disprove a diagnosis. It goes into how they can be performed on the entire body or for just a particular body organ. There are some synonymous terms for autopsy. Another name for them could be necropsy or a post-mortem examination. Autopsies are generally performed by either a hospital pathologist, which sometimes you're going to see us abbreviate HP, or a physician on the medical staff who, let's flip kind of quickly and get over here, has been delegated this responsibility. So let's look at that one more time, because this is a rule. You probably saw that written here in the corner, right? Autopsies are generally performed by the hospital pathologist or a physician on the medical staff who has been delegated the responsibility. So exactly when would that happen? Delegation of the responsibility would happen if the current pathologist that normally completes the autopsies happens to be on vacation or they're sick, So there's lots of reasons that a physician may be delegated to do the autopsy on behalf of the hospital pathologist. It's just we need to be told that, because as you move through this chapter, you'll find that understanding when our guy does, and when I say our guy, I mean hospital pathologist. When our hospital pathologist performs the autopsy is important, because we need to know how to count them. So the book goes on to say that autopsies are usually performed in the hospital morgue, but in the case of small hospitals that don't have a morgue, it can be removed to an off-site lab or a funeral home for the autopsy. So on page 122, we jump right into autopsy rates, and let's take a look at the gross autopsy rate. The autopsy rate is the proportion of deaths that are followed by the performance of an autopsy. So that first sentence is important to know, that not every one of your deaths in your facility will require an autopsy. And I know the chapter kind of expands on that, but just kind of keep that in mind. So a gross, and we were used to the term gross death rate, so now we have gross autopsy rate, is the ratio of all inpatient autopsies to all inpatients' deaths during a given period of time. This is important. Outpatients are considered in other autopsy formulas. Right now we're just dealing with inpatients. We're going to pick up outpatients later on, but right now we're only going to deal with inpatients. And again, it goes on to talk to you about actual over potential, that concept of a rate. Typically, newborn autopsies are included in the gross rate, but may be calculated separately as determined by the hospital. So we know, just like in gross death rate, that this includes newborns. And the newborns probably have their own separate rate, but for the gross autopsy rate, we're going to count them here. So total autopsies on inpatient deaths over total deaths for the period. So let's just jump right in to 7.1. And I know you have this in the back of the book, but let's take a look at it anyway, since it's the first use of it. True or false, in a 1-month period, a 300-bed hospital with 20 bassinets reported 18 deaths. The medical staff performed 6 autopsies. The gross rate is 32.50%. And it was is this true or false? So if you're following the gross death rate formula, which says the total number of the total number of autopsies on inpatient deaths to the number of deaths for the period, you're going to set it up like this: 6 autopsies multiplied by 100 over 18 deaths in that period for 33.33%. So our answer is going to be false. Number 2, in January, Community Hospital had 100 85 discharges, 9 deaths, and 2 autopsies. What is the gross rate? Round to 2 decimal places. So we're going to pull out the 2 autopsies, the 9 deaths, do the calculation for 22.22%. And then number 3 says, during the last semi-annual period, University Hospital had 6,234 discharges, 18 deaths, and 15 autopsies. What's the gross rate? Round to 2 decimal places. 15 autopsies to 18 deaths multiplied by 100 for 83.33%. Now, you don't have 7.2 in the back of the book, so I've written that out for you here as well. It says, using the information in the table below, calculate the gross death rate, the net death rate, which all of those are Chapter 6, but we're going to get some practice, and the gross autopsy rate for community hospital for the time period, and they want you to round to 2 decimal places. And so you've got community hospitals statistics from July to December. You're given the total number of inpatient discharges, including the deaths, the total number of inpatient deaths, and then a breakdown of what occurred under 48 hours, because we're going to need that for the net, and then total number of autopsies. So your first problem asks you to calculate the gross death rate, and we know from Chapter 6 that includes everybody, so it's deaths to discharges. So we had 19 deaths, 724 discharges, those include the deaths, so we don't have to worry about adding them back in, for 2.62%. Now we're going to set up the net death rate similarly, right? But what we're doing, remember, is subtracting those deaths that occur under 48 hours to make our rate look a little better, because, you know, we don't want to be held accountable for those deaths under 48 hours. So 2.22% after you subtract out those deaths under 48 hours. So that's a review from Chapter 6. So let's get right on into the gross autopsy rate, which is here on page 122. So the total autopsies on inpatient deaths, which were 6, we're going to pull it right from our chart, over the total number of deaths, which is 19, for 31.58%. And I love that they do this, because take a look at the death rates, you know, your 2 death rates versus this autopsy rate. So seeing these large numbers with autopsy rates, as you did up here as well, but shouldn't concern you when you take a look at the numbers. You know, it's 6 out of 19, so that makes perfectly good sense that that would be 31.58%. So remember, death rates typically low, autopsy rates are going to look a little higher. All right, so let's move on to the net. And we know from the net death rate, what that has to mean with autopsies is we're going to subtract something out, right? So the net autopsy rate is the ratio during any given period of time of all inpatient autopsies to all inpatient deaths minus unautopsied coroner's cases. So it excludes bodies that have been removed. Let me get the page turned, and up here where you can see it, been removed by the coroner. And so why? Here's why. Because the body has been removed from the hospital, it is not considered. Because guess what, y'all? If it's not there, if it's been removed by the coroner, we can't perform an autopsy on it because it's no longer in our facility. So the next couple of paragraphs are important, where they talk about what exactly a coroner is and what exactly a medical examiner is. And I'm going to write ME above medical examiner, and then I'm going to write COR for coroner out to the side, because those are some abbreviations that you might see for coroner and medical examiner. So I want to make sure that you have the abbreviations for that. So your formula for net is going to be total autopsies on inpatient deaths for the period, which is very similar to what the gross was, but the difference is we're going to take the total number of inpatient deaths and we're going to subtract out those coroners or medical examiner cases because they're gone. Makes total sense, right? So we're going to zip on over to 7.3, and I'm going to work the gross and the, oh, you have that one. So let's just skip right on to 7.4. So let's look at 7.4 instead. And I know that's on 2 different sheets of paper, or 2 different pages, and that can get kind of difficult to look at, but we're going to be able to make it. So using the information in the table below, calculate the gross death, gross autopsy, and net rates, net autopsy for University Hospital. In this exercise, deaths are included in the discharges, and they want you to round to 2 decimal places. And so community hospitals, quarterly statistics, you've got deaths and discharges broken down by your 2 populations, adults and children and newborn. Your deaths are given to you the same way. But up here it's deaths and discharges, so you know that the deaths are included in the discharges. You've got your number of inpatient autopsies and your number of coroner's cases with a nice little note that says unavailable for autopsy. So we're going to continue that on the next page and get started with the gross death rate, which if you look on the previous page, we've got 33 deaths. I'm going to multiply that. Oops, I'm sorry, y'all. I got ahead of myself. We've got 33 adult and children deaths, plus 2 newborn deaths. And you can't see where I'm running because my hand's in the way. I'll move it, times 100 over 1,080 adult and children discharges, 270 newborn discharges, and you should get 2.59% is what you should calculate here. Your gross autopsy is going to be 12 inpatient autopsies multiplied by 100, so we're following that from the table. And below, we have to use the total number of deaths, so we are going to come back up here and grab the 33 adult and children and the 2 newborn. And that's going to get us 34.29%. Now the net set up very similarly, right? 12 multiplied by 100 over 33 plus 2. But we have to subtract out those unautopsied coroner's cases, y'all. Remember, there were 3. So we've got to subtract out 3 for 37.50%. And that increases our autopsy rate. So we're not dinged necessarily on autopsies for patients that we don't have their body any longer. So this is so important. And if you're following the formula, you won't forget about it. So 7.5, you should have all of the answers for 7.5 in the back of the book. I will, let me see. Let me grab a sheet of paper, and we're going to do, how about January, gross and net? So gross autopsy. We're going to set that up as 2 autopsies multiplied by 100 over the number of deaths, and that should get us 40.00%, right? So 40.0%. Then the net autopsy, we're going to take those same 2 autopsies, multiplied by 100 over 5 minus the 1 coroner's case. So it gives us 4, right, for 50%. And it asks us to go to 2 decimal places, so that's why I've got the 2 zeros there. So that's how you set up, I know that's back there, but that's how you set up this particular table. And hopefully, even though you've got the answers in the back of the book, that's part of the great thing about this textbook, that you're able to work these problems and check yourself. So we're going to stop right here, and then we'll pick back up with hospital autopsy.